Absolutely. You all just got it all, right? That's awesome. Now, what I'd love for you to do is, you all identified this as a very powerful quote and how it spoke to you personally, educationally, right? But as you move into the world, right, and as you start to relate with people and in your field or your career, this is an awesome quote to share with people, with families, with individuals who you might encounter or work with. It can be very encouraging, right? So it's just something to offer you as an opportunity for us to connect on something that's, we many of us can relate to, but it's also a gift for you to share with others in your career journey. So I just wanted to put that out there. My phone number and email is on here, so it'll be here, and you're welcome to just take it and feel free to call me anytime, email me, whatever you want to do to reach out to me. So this is me. I'm again Dorothy Santana. Um, I am a daughter of an immigrant. I'm a social worker. I'm Latina. I'm bilingual. I have faith. I have a family. Colombian American. I'm a wife. I'm a woman. I'm a mom. I love music. I love to dance. Right? These are all the things that kind of make up who I am. And I'm sure many of you, right, uh, can can relate to so many of these things, whether whatever your ethnicity is, right? What you own, what language you speak, the interests you have, how you identify, right? What are some of your passions, like, right? Social justice or whatever. So this is kind of who I am. And I have to tell you that throughout my life journey, I've learned what matters most is relationships and connection, right? Relationships and connection. And so when you think about relationships and connection, what do you think about? Why is that important, or why?
You're like, you never know who you're gonna need. You never know when you're gonna need that referral. You never know when you're gonna need that person to to put them down as a reference. You're never gonna know. So making connections is just for me personally, you shouldn't try and get around it. You should always try and make as many connections as you possibly can.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I love what you just shared. And one thing that I learned throughout my journey in the work that I've done is that not only you never know when you might need that person's referral or recommendation, right, that you want to connect to, but you never know if you don't make these authentic connections, you never know what opportunities might become available to you, right? Or who that person has in their own context and in their own life that can really support and help you, right? Um, you could be sitting next to somebody on the train or in the park, and you don't know. They have a story, right? And that can actually be something that can support you or benefit you in some way if you build a connection with someone, right? So you never know, right? So um I love that, the idea that relationships are really, really important, and they are what matter. And there's such an important element of connectedness and connection that is not only important in life, but it's good for you. It's healthy, right? It supports our development, it supports our mental health, our social well-being, right? The ability to have connectedness. It's so critical. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yep. One of the things that I tell my kids, and I've told other people this too, that I kind of navigate life as if I'm on a job interview, right? When I'm encountering different experiences and relationships or opportunities where I'm networking and connecting with people, I almost navigate it like I'm on an interview, right? I want to present myself well, right? I want to make authentic connections with people, right? Because I don't want to be fake. People pick up on when you're fake. You don't want to do that, right? Um, and I want to be able to present myself in a way that people will see what my strengths are, where I can lead, what my experience might be, right? Because like you said, if you end up finding somebody or needing a connection because for a job or whatever, they can refer you to something, at least, you've made an impression on them, right? And so I kind of like always try to navigate life like I'm almost like I'm on a job interview. It could be a little stressful because you're like, when can I let my hair done and just hang out, right? But I save those times for like when I'm with family or when I'm with my girls, and I want to hang out at dinner, whatever. So those are the times that you can kind of like let loose, right? But so yeah. Uh, Let me see. Next slide to get to. All right. So my own personal educational journey started out. I did undergraduate work at Buffalo State College. I knew I wanted to be a social worker and I knew I wanted to help people. I always had this knack for like just being able to be a good listener, support people and help people. So it was something I always knew I wanted to do. And that's very fortunate. I'm blessed that I had that because not everybody does. People leave high school and early in college not really knowing, and their journey is a little different than mine, where I kind of knew my path, what I wanted to take, and not everybody goes through that, right? Some people are always still, early on, still figuring it out, just trying to figure out what is it they're interested in, what are their goals, right? And some of those things. So I was very blessed to know. This would have been a hard thing to do with work when working with homeless people and people who are mentally ill, right? I keep saying homeless people, I'm sorry, people who are homeless. We want to use person first language. So people who are homeless. So when I was going into the parks, that's challenging. You're going into a park, people who are, have mental health issues. They're, depending on their diagnosis, they're either, you know, hallucinating or talking to themselves, they're hearing voices, they are could be behave very erratically. It's very challenging, but the opportunity to be there and just make connections, was a way to build trust with them. And so we'd go out and into the parks and hand out cigarettes and food and just kind of like start off like that, really very, very, like you said, Marley, grassroots, cigarettes, food, until they started to see, okay, this is somebody who we can trust. She doesn't want anything from us, and then just build those relationships, invite them to our center. We had a shower. Clients came in, they take showers, they were able to change their clothes, with the ultimate goal of getting them to see a psychiatrist if they needed, and supporting them to get into housing. So I'm happy to say I was only there for about a year, but I'm happy to say that I did secure housing for one person who was homeless, which is pretty major. So I remember handing him his key to his own apartment, and it was just an incredible experience. And the impact that you have on people, it's incredible. So that was one of the first career moves I had right out of college. After that, I worked in foster care. That was a journey, a very short journey also. It was just for about a year because I ended up hating it. I thought I'd love it because I thought I would enjoy working with kids. However, it was very bureaucratic. It was a lot of paperwork because you're reporting to the courts. Um, it was very overwhelming and not very family centered and relationship centered, which was very disillusioning and disappointing for me. So I was not happy and I wanted to just change um, careers. I mean, not careers, but change work after that. Yeah, it is sad to hear. And I think even now, people see the foster care system as a very challenging um, place, unless you're in place and have the opportunity to make systems change, right? But working on the front lines, it's really hard. I know though, making those relationships with families and children who were in the situation, I know I had an impact. So the idea that I was able to touch lives was very very gratifying, not just gratifying, but moving. And I knew that there was an impact that I had on children, and during a very, very difficult time where they're, going between their foster parents and their birth parents. And, so it was tough. Um, but then I kind of realized, so, I have chat stuff, could be the same as a welfare child caseworker. Well, child caseworker. It could be. Um, it depends. Like, there's different levels, right? So if you're working for like CPS, the Child Protective Services, those are workers who are going in to maybe investigate whether an allegation of abuse is founded or unfounded, right? And so CPS workers often go in to do investigations, and they begin an investigation and make those determinations based on whatever interviews they do, the home visits, and so on. The foster care worker is that stage once it is found that a child is already experienced abuse or neglect. They are then removed from their birth parents and placed into a foster care system, which is hopefully with their, kin family, right? Their own family. And if not, then a foster home that's supposedly, been investigated and already trained. So that's kind of like the next level. So yeah, yeah. Thanks. That's a great question, Amar. And I think what you just shared about wanting to have the experience yourself is very important, right? Because we all have our own experiences, our own perceptions, right? And our own takeaways from things. And an outsider can't necessarily share that same experience because you come from a different experience than I do. I may have hated it. Someone else might come in, have a different perspective because of their own experience, right? And they'll come into it and just love the field, love the work, right? So it's not necessarily something like I would advise like what you're doing. Don't always take what people say as fact, right? That's based on their own experience. You have to really determine for yourself, right? And get into it yourself to determine whether it's something you're going to like or not like. So I think that's good that you're going to go for it because um, you can't always. It's like I tell my kids, right? They get their teacher list, right, of who their teacher's going to be next year, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I got Mr. Greco. I hate him." I'm like, "How do you hate him? You don't even know him." Like, "Oh, but Amy said that he's the worst teacher." And I says, "Well, why are you listening to her? You don't know. Maybe something happened and it just wasn't right." And so you have to have your own experience. You can't go by what everybody else says. So I'm glad you're doing that. But back to your question, um, you know, I my first job, I took it because I had the skills, I had experience. One of my internships in college was working in a day program for people who had mental health issues. So my first experience out of college was working at that street outreach program, working with people who were mentally ill. So that was like, it was familiar to me, right? So I went for that job because I had the experience through my internship. And I says, I'm going to try this. I have the skills, I have experience. I was bilingual and I can do it. And I got hired. So it was great, right? And I thought, okay, I really like this. But after a while, I was like, I don't know if I really want to keep working with adults. I knew that from a volunteer opportunity I had back in college that I did volunteer work with children who were witnesses to domestic violence. And because my own personal experience in my home, right, where there was some domestic violence, I felt a connection to that. And so I says, you know what? I would love to work with children. And so um, I tried the foster care, right? After that experience and seeing how bureaucratic it was, and it was a lot of paperwork that I wasn't very fond of, I decided I really thought I would rather shift to working in the area of domestic violence with children who were witnesses to domestic violence because I had my own experience as a witness, right? as a child witness of domestic violence. And then I also had the experience in the internship where I worked with children who were witnesses to domestic violence. So I thought, you know what, my dream job would be to work for an organization with children who were witnesses to domestic violence. That was after, I had done the mental health and after I had done foster care. I said, okay, I'm ready to move on. And so that was when I decided, I think this will be for me. And so I learned of an opening at this domestic violence organization, which happens to be in El Barrio. And it's the only Latina domestic violence organization um, in the state. And they had an opening for a children's coordinator. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is like, has me written all over it, right? So I interviewed and it was great. I got the job and I dedicated 11 plus years of my life at that organization. Um, so I really felt that was, at least in that season of my life, that was for me. Like that was where I was meant to be, right? And that's the other thing. We go through seasons, right? Like you like, what is for me? Well, for me right now, it was this, right? But for me in 10 years, it could be something else. So your journey will always take different paths, right? And so it's always important to know, like, you know, there's always going to be a different season in your life. And so for me, that 11, 12-year season was just, one of the most fulfilling experiences I had. I learned, and I was about 25. Yeah, I was 25, between 25 and 36, 7 years old when I worked there. So that age range, 25 to 36, wow, you really, really are growing and figuring out who you are and what you want, right? Sometimes we think that we know it all when we're like teenagers, like we know nothing, right? But we grow and we learn. And so when I was there between that age, I learned the most about the profession. I learned the most about community. I learned the most about the actual movement itself, domestic violence. I learned the most about social justice issues. I learned the most about me as a woman, as a person. Like that was, the most pivotal time in my life that I felt most connected to the work. And I had um, mentors within that organization that really, helped develop me as a leader, as a worker in the field. And I moved up throughout, right? I only had a bachelor's, but back then they paid decent money, this organization. I mean, I was it was a good salary at that time. um, and and I moved up because of the experience and so on. Yeah, that's the beauty of social work. It's so general, right? It is. Social work is so broad, so you can move around and change and have different experiences with a social work or like human services type of degree. So those were some of the things I think that kind of led me to know what I wanted after trying it out, not always listening to other people, but trying it out and having the experience. I think having a personal experience also, I think, led me to feel most connected to that field of choice, domestic violence, as someone who was witness to domestic violence as a child. That connection, I feel like, was important in helping me determine that that was a field that I wanted to be in, right? And so, if you were a foster child, you might want to get in the foster care system, right? Because you have your own personal experience and you're able to make that connection, and you have that lived experience that you can share with others, right, in the field. And so, yeah. Um, so that was that experience. Um, and then I'll just share this slide. Oh, this slide really quick. I'm sorry. This slide really quick. These are just some pictures of the work I had done, right? And so in here, I don't know if you can access the file, but here there's a quick of the kind of outreach I had done. Um, uh-huh. Oh, I missed that. The chat went away really fast. I didn't get to read the whole thing.
Ebony writes, I actually want to get to experience all the careers under the human services belt. Some due to my upbringings, and some reasons because I just want to make a difference because not everybody do their jobs for the right reasons.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, you'll see that as you move throughout the different areas in social work, Ebony, um, you'll find like your niche. You'll see where you feel your strengths uh, could be served best and where your passion really is. So as you move around, you'll discover that. You'll see it, and it'll change and develop. Like I said earlier, depending on the season you're in, right? The season in life. So yeah. So these are just some pictures, So here in El Barrio or in New York City, I don't know, any of you have heard of the Brides March against domestic violence. Anybody hear of the Brides March against domestic violence? It starts in the Bronx and then ends in Manhattan. No, never heard of it. Oh, okay. So um, several years ago, I can't remember how many, almost 20 or more than, yeah, almost 20 years. A woman was killed by her batterer. El Barrio is East Harlem. So just to clarify, when I keep saying El Barrio is East Harlem, so it's Upper Manhattan and East Harlem. So a woman was killed by her ex-boyfriend on her wedding day. Her name was Gladys Ricard. And she was a victim of domestic violence, had broken up with her boyfriend because of his abuse, and she then met someone else and was prepared to be remarried. She went on her wedding day. As she's getting dressed, her ex-boyfriend appeared and shot her and killed her. Yeah, it was devastating to her, the family, the community. It was horrible. So a woman heard about this, and she in Florida wanted to do something to raise awareness about domestic violence because it was just devastating what happened. And it's not just her. There's so many other victims, right? People who don't survive domestic violence. But this woman, Josie Ashton, actually walked from Florida to New Jersey in protest to domestic violence, right? To help raise awareness to the issue. And so now, year after year, people come together in wedding dresses to commemorate Gladys Ricard, and they march through the city from Washington Heights into the Bronx and back into East Harlem. And so every September 27th, this is something that happens. So, if you look up Brides March, New York City, or New York City Brides March, you're welcome to join. People get dresses donated, people dressed in the wedding gowns, and they march, to help raise awareness of domestic violence. So these are just some pictures of, different areas of work I've been in. And then obviously social work, as we said, there's that opportunity to work in different areas, right? That's so broad. You could work in geriatrics, you could work with children, you could work as a school social worker, foster care, domestic violence, just so many things. But then that's direct work, right? You could be on the front lines. And then there's administrative work, right? Where you're like on management level and you're overseeing the work, right? That social workers are doing. And you have an impact, that indirect impact, right? Because you're leading an organization or programs that are serving people. But then that's more like meso level social work. And then you have macro social work, which is really about policy changes and community, right? And so some of the pictures you see here is some of that work where I'm in there with other community people, advocating for laws and justice and so on. So those are some of the other pictures that you see there. Then my journey, I had a couple of kids, and then I had a couple more, and I moved out to Long Island. And I kind of put my career path on pause, obviously because my hands were full of kids, right? So I became a stay-at-home mom, sacrificed a lot, um, because who can afford to stay at home watching their kids? Thankfully, my husband had, he's a train operator, so he operates the M train, um, and so we lived off of his salary, but that was the focus. The family was the focus at that time. So I took a pause from my career in social work. Once I did that, I started to feel really kind of isolated and feeling like, oh, I don't know how. I moved to Long Island also, which was another shift. And I felt isolated. I didn't feel like connected to people here on Long Island. I felt isolated as a mom. I had four kids, or had three at the time, but I had little ones, and there's never time to do anything, right? You're like always chasing after the kids. Either they're going to daycare, they're going to school. Like it's a lot to juggle motherhood, parenthood, right? Um, and so I took this course because I felt like I need to reconnect with people. Um, I took this course called Parent Leadership Initiative. Um, and that course gave me the opportunity to be around other people, learn about Long Island, learn about how Um, and so I felt connected. Plus, I was able to bring my kids. They offered dinner, and it was just a great opportunity to kind of like be um, connected with people again, right? Again, that power of relationships and connectedness was so important because you could drown in motherhood, right? All the mommies in here that I've been seeing in the chat, I'm a mom of three, and me, right? Tell me, can you not drown in the motherhood journey when the kids are little, and just it can be really overwhelming, and if you don't have those opportunities to connect with others, it's hard. So um so yeah, parenting, I took this course back to that motherhood journey. Now we all are like have like this other thing in common, so many of us are parents, and share that struggle of parenting, right? And juggling life while we're parenting. It's hard. Um, so for me, one of the other things as a mom, I started to realize while I moved here to Long Island was that I lived in Queens for a long time. I grew up here on Long Island. I went to school in Buffalo, and then I lived in Queens. I worked in Manhattan and so on, worked in the Bronx. Um, But then after living in Queens for a while, I moved after I had kids to Long Island with the thinking that, oh, we'll have a house with a yard, better schools, right? And I thought it was going to be much better. Well, the grass is not always greener on the other side, like they say, right? One, it was somewhat isolating, like I mentioned. I was in a community that was somewhat diverse, but my kids were going to school, and it was mostly children who were white, but they were not really relating to so many other kids that look like them, right? That they were able to identify with, um, and it was expensive, and I felt that my kids were kind of losing a connection to culture. So one story I'll share is that one of my kids, um, he was like my third son. He was 6 years old, maybe. He says to me one day, as we're either coming home from school or going to school, he says, Mommy, I wish my skin was pink. And I was like, What? What do you mean? He says, I wish my skin was pink like Casey. And Casey was one of his good friends who was a young white boy. And I says, Bobby, why do you wish that? I says, you're beautiful. You have a beautiful toasted almond color skin, and you're beautiful. And you know what? God made us all different. He made us like a rainbow. Everybody's a different color, a different shape, a different size, right? And that's what makes us all beautiful and different. And so you're beautiful the way you are. And then, that was like very impactful for me. So I started talking to other moms about their parenting journey and feeling like their kids weren't feeling like they belonged or they felt connected to culture, right? My kids were like, oh, we want to eat chicken nuggets and french fries. And, meanwhile, I wanted them to eat, Latin food, rice and gandules and pernil and carne guisada and all that stuff, right? They liked it, but, you know, I wanted to make sure that we were sharing traditions, but it was really hard to do that. So I started talking to other moms who were having similar experiences, and so these moms were like, "Yes, my kids feel the same way. Like he's the only Latino in his classroom. Like no one looks like him. They make fun of his name, or they make fun of his hair, or whatever. Or my kid, who is actually Colombian, thinks they're Mexican because that's all the kids in the classroom talk about, right? And it's like, no, we got to do something about this, right? And so I thought I have to create a space where we come together and have these conversations. So I created this Facebook group um, called Latina Moms of Long Island. And so back in 2014, we started this online group where moms on Facebook just started coming together to talk about parenting and culture and connecting their kids to culture and so on. And so that was really impactful. After years of us connecting online, I felt like we have to do something in person. I mean, after 1 year of connecting online, I was like, we got to do something in person because I need to like bring these relationships together. And so I started something called Sofrito Sunday. And so moms would open their home and then people signed up and we would all come to one house. Everybody would bring a different ingredient and we would all have a conversation about parenting, about identity, about culture, about how you identified as a Latina and who nurtured that in you, and then how are you nurturing that in your kids. And then we would make sofrito, and everybody was like, they loved the experience because people were coming from, Massapequa, and there wasn't a supermarket that sold recao or sofrito. So when they would come to Sofrito Sunday, they were like, oh my God, I get to have sofrito really homemade, right? I don't have to buy the frozen stuff. So it was, a really awesome experience. So after doing that and a few other events and activities, this was an amazing opportunity that I was like, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than this Facebook group. This is bigger than just these, you know, um, Sofrito Sunday afternoons. So I ended up creating a nonprofit organization out of it. And so I turned it into a nonprofit. And so that now is what I do. I'm the founder and president of Latina Moms Connect, which now we do these kind of activities. Sofrito Sunday, we do bochinche brunch, we do a parranda navideña, we do a cena con los reyes, which is a Three Kings Day dinner. So we do different things to give kids the opportunity to have different cultural experiences that they may not have in their own communities, right? And we bring moms together to talk about that parenting journey um, and the struggles or successes of raising bicultural kids. So it's been pretty awesome. Um, the other here it is. So that's kind of like what my journey was, right? Um, and then I wanted to check back with you all to just ask you, what inspired you to work with people? What are some of the things that inspire you to be feel that you kind of are are going into now? So you can unmute and just share out. Anybody?
Hello, class. Go ahead. This is your opportunity. Why are we here? Why are we
Sorry,
here?
can you repeat the question?
Oh, just what inspired you to work with people, or like what inspired you to get into this field of study? Um, On this next slide, these are just some highlights of, the group, Latina Moms Connect, what we do. So now through social networking, facilitated discussions, we have large family cultural celebrations. We've been highlighted in the paper. We did a lot of work around COVID. We've done discussions at universities, and we've been on different TV programs and radio shows, and recently on Tamron Hall. So it's been pretty cool. Um, last, this leads me now to family and community engagement specialist and culturally responsive education specialist. So the last two areas in the field of work that I've been in, I think people started seeing the work I was doing with Latina Moms Connect, and I needed, some income. So someone, among the connections I was making, offered me a position around family and community engagement as a part-time, and I thought this was great. I can do this work part-time, and still, help take care of my family and do the work that I wanted to do in the community. And then I thought I need really full-time work. And so I decided to go back to school. I'm a returning learner. I went from to my graduate education in social work, graduate school at Stony Brook, just, I don't know, 4 years ago, 2018, because the field of social work really wasn't paying with a bachelor's. And so I thought I needed to advance my education and go ahead and get my master's. So I did. I went back to school at 50. I graduated at 50. So once, 4 years ago, I went full time to Stony Brook and completed my master's degree and started working full time, which then led me to my current position as a culturally responsive education specialist. Again, this was, the opportunity I had because of people and connections and relationships that I had built throughout my journey, because I wasn't looking for this job, right? It took me 2 years. I went full time. Somebody asked in the chat, how long did it take me to get my master's? It took me 2 years because I went full time. It was the only thing I dedicated myself to, aside from my family. But I didn't cook often. They had to eat a lot of takeout or cereal for dinner because I was too busy writing papers and studying, and so. But yeah, it took me 2 years. Thank you so much. Thanks, Kimberly. But people can do it over a longer period of time. You go part time, chip away at it, and so it's doable. And it led me to the work that I'm doing now. Again, because of those relationships I had built, it wasn't like I was looking for a job, particularly in this field in education where I'm at right now. It was out of relationships and connections I was making that led me here. And initially I was like, I don't know if I can do this, right? To hold this position as a culturally responsive education specialist. I've never really taken any courses on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I really can't speak to that. I don't know that field, or, I just started having all these doubts and self-talk, saying, this really isn't for you. You won't be able to do this. This isn't something, you didn't go to school for that, right? I went for social work. But I decided to just go for it. And so I says, okay, I accepted the position, and that's the work I'm doing right now, which has been great. So this is, a quick snapshot of the trainings that I facilitate now. So what I do now is I go into school districts and I offer professional development to teachers and administrators around equity, diversity, culture, and how to be culturally responsive. So that's what I do now. You don't need a social work degree. You did need a master's, but it's kind of like a different level, I guess, of social work. But it's still an amazing opportunity because I know I'm having somewhat of a systemic impact on the educational system, right? And so I'm training teachers and educators on culturally responsive practices. And so I'm a culturally responsive education specialist. So I specialize in cultural responsiveness, and I train educators and administrators on how to be culturally responsive and how to address issues of disproportionality, right? When schools are maybe over suspending Black students or Hispanic students, or maybe they're over classifying students of color in special education, right? And so I offer trainings around some of those issues. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Um, and some of the things that I think takeaways that I'd want to share with you are, I've said this earlier, like many of you are so brave. Continue to be brave, continue to be vulnerable, do self work. I think when we have our own personal experiences and trials, right, that lead us to the work that we want to do, whether it's different traumas or experiences that have been very challenging, you really have to do some work around healing, right? So it's important to heal and do self work before getting into this field, because when you get into the field, if you haven't done work to heal from some of those traumas, they can resurface and trigger additional traumas for you, right? Or you have that tertiary trauma. I forget what it's called, but just make sure you're doing some of that self work or self healing work um, in from this field. Um, own your skills. Triangulation. Thank you, Marlene. Someone else had something in the chat. I missed it because it goes really fast.
Hi, Taisha asked, how long have you been doing this for? Your job title.
Oh, yep. So right now I've been doing it for 2.5 years or 3 years. I think 3 years now.
And the role is called Culturally Responsive Education Specialist?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Ebony.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Um, the other takeaway I want you to have is to like own your skills and your talents, right? They're yours. They've come from you, they've come from your experiences, right? Own them. Know that they're what shaped you. If you have the privilege of um, taking or the opportunity to take a, what is it called? A skills finder, or what is it called? Skills finder? Um, like a personality test? Strengths finder. A strengths finder. If you have the opportunity to take one of those strengths finder tests or something, I would say do it. I found that I have all these talents and skills, right? But when I took that strength finder test, um, it identified certain things, and it affirmed and confirmed so much of who I am, and it helped me understand why I do certain things or why some of these careers I chose, right? And why connection is important or why I'm really good at it, because I have certain strengths in the ability to connect people. And there are strengths for that. So like if you look up Strengths Finder or something like that, there's a book and there's a whole test, and it's very revealing, and it was very empowering for me. So own them, right? Own your skills and your talents. Um, take your space or your seat at the table, right? And if no one invites you, you can knock on the door and make your space or create your own table, right? So Ashley did that, right? She felt like maybe she wasn't at the table during these conversations when you talk about aftercare for people who are in certain situations. So she made a table. She made the table, and she's got 60,000 people sitting at her table.
And I got steak and potatoes and broccoli on the table too.
Wepa, there you go. So take your space or your seat at the table or create your table, right? Make your seat. Don't let people I'm supposed to say put doubt. Um, oh wait, don't let people in on your doubts or imperfections. Yeah, we're not all perfect, right? So what I'm saying by that is if you have, like, let's say you're going to give a talk or a presentation in class, or you're going to go meet someone for the first time or something, right? Don't let the first thing out of your mouth be, oh, excuse me, but I don't really know a lot about this topic, but I'm going to just share what I learned. Or excuse me, but I have a fear of talking. I get really nervous. So bear with me, right? Excuse me, but I don't really like it. Once you do that, all you're doing is drawing attention to that thing. So don't even share it. Just be brave, be bold, go for what you're doing without sharing some of those doubts that you have, right? Yes. Listen to your words, they influence your actions. Yes. Okay. Stay connected with others. That's another thing I want you to take away. Stay connected with others, right? Be vulnerable and share, right? Look at how much connectedness came out of today just from people sharing, being vulnerable and sharing, right? Stay connected with others. It's empowering. It's powerful and empowering. It's healthy. It supports your social well-being, your personal well-being. Help, if you have children, help your kids stay connected with others. It's healthy for them. Volunteer or intern to give and grow, right? Even though you're not getting paid, it's okay. You're not getting paid with money, right? Your bank account's not getting full, but your emotional bank account, your intellectual bank account is totally filling up. And that is invaluable because what you take from those experiences are going to grow you into other areas. Paid with knowledge, yes, and experience. Thank you. Always look at systems, right? I think Catherine had said people come to us, right, because they need help, right? The other thing that I want you to always to think about is how are these systems created that people aren't able to either move out or go beyond, right? Because there can always be a change with systems as opposed to people, right? It's not always people that need to change, right? It's systems that need to change because many of our systems have been designed to be defeat to like put us in some defeat mode, right? We're going to be defeated by the system because that's how it was designed for many of us people of color. Yes, holds us back. Yes. So always look at the system and how you can um, just understand it, right? And have that critical perspective around systems and systems change. And what can you do to help make changes within the system? And just always have a go for it attitude, you know? Just go for it. Somebody said it earlier. I think they were sharing and says they just decided to do it, whether it was going to school. I can't recall, but yeah, just kind of just be brave, go for it. Um, and I think that was it. That was it for me. I don't know if anybody has questions or wants, right? This is awesome. The other thing is I was gonna get to the end to share this, but the other is being vulnerable. I totally hear you. I totally hear you. Oh, it's not letting me. Is the screen still sharing? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
just sharing and now
Okay.
I went away.
Okay, got it. Okay.